Welcome to the Podium, the Pick and Rolls National Basketball Podcast as we continue through the Paris 2024 Olympic Games. I'm Adam Webster and I'm joined today by Pick and Roll feature writer Will Crouch. Will, thanks for joining us once again on the Podium Pod.
Oh, mate, thank you for having me. It's been a stressful morning, hasn't it?
So stressful, ridiculous, really. And what we've sort of come to expect from the Opals so far in this tournament, they've given us a bit of a breakneck speed. They've made things really difficult for themselves. That initial loss to Nigeria, and they've just made it by the skin of their teeth over both in the group and also over playing the US, which was a distinct possibility in this particular permutation of the way that the rankings fell out. They only just got over France by the right number of points to finish second in the group. So the good news is, Will, they've missed out on Team USA.
Massive result, really promising. I mean, that in itself is a massive result. We know these Opals are built to get to the podium, but as we all know in tournament play, you only need one bad crossover or bad result and everything can come unstuck before you even get a chance to play off and look to get on the podium. So massive result in itself. We know the Opals struggled a little bit at the World Cup in that first game. They had an early loss, but then from there they worked things out and they eventually had a really amazing tournament. Only just missed out on playing for gold. Obviously a really good result there. So that Nigeria loss, well, there were a lot of alarm bells. I think, you know, in the back of my mind, I know I was thinking we have seen this before. And so I guess the good thing is, even though there have been some issues throughout the three games, at the end of the day, they finish second. They go 2-1. They avoid the USA. So probably the best case scenario after that Nigeria loss in many ways, I'd say. Adam, I don't know what you think.
Absolutely. I think after the Nigeria loss, we were pretty shell-shocked after that particular result. So from that perspective, we were looking at it and thinking, are they going to get through it all? Let alone are they going to fall into one of those, top three spots and make their way into a quarterfinal against one of the best two teams in the tournament? That's a really far-fetched outcome with how they played against Nigeria. They were not ready for that level of physicality. They were not ready for how well Nigeria played. And full credit to Nigeria. They were wonderful. They finished, second or third in the group as it stands right now with 2 wins and 1 loss. And Australia just got over the top of them in terms of points differential. So that had a great tournament. Canada obviously, conversely, didn't win a game. So that win doesn't quite look as impressive as it did before. But the win against France today was spectacular. We have to talk about Tess Madgen. There were a lot of conversations, and I remember after the previous stream, Haley and I spoke about the difference between Jade running the team and Tess running the team. You had a really dynamic, fast-paced, offense under Jade. For Tess, it was more measured. It was more deliberate. It was slower. And for the amount that this team turned the ball over, it seemed like they really needed the latter, which is why Tess not only played a lot more than this contest, but was able to unlock, her skill set and have the game of her life.
Yeah, and I think in the first 2 games, one thing I noticed is when Madgen was on the floor with Wickham, she spent a lot of time waiting in the corner. She was mostly reduced to just being a shooter off dribble drive. This game, we saw a completely different version of that. Madgen was aggressive. She was looking for a shot. She was much more engaged, whether that was something they did specifically, whether something she tried to do more. Either way, had the game of her life. And I think the thing that sticks out to me with that is that Madgen's been building to this tournament and this moment probably for the last 18 months. A lot of players have been playing WNBA, WNBL, EuroLeague, doing all sorts of different things, which you have to do as a basketballer. I'm not begrudging that whatsoever. But Madgen, she's taken time out of the WNBL to rehab those injuries. She didn't play NBL 1 this year. She's really had these Olympics as what she's been building towards. As the captain, she's been crucially important off court, building connections with the chemistry, with the culture, so many other things. But at the end of the day, you play basketball because of what you do on the court as well. And I think it's just a great reward for effort to see Madgen given the opportunity, but when she's had those opportunities, she was hitting shots. She looked confident in her shooting tonight. when she was driving, she looked aggressive and looked willing to get up and make contact and finish. So incredible game from the captain. And you could see the emotion at the end of the game. There was I think the relief was quite palpable. The girls were pumped up when that final siren went, and that was led by Madgen, who I think, it's not surprising that those kind of emotions, those positive emotions spill out at the end of a game like that. She was incredible. I think a few people, fans and commentators, were a bit surprised at how early and how frequently she was in Sandy's rotation initially. But Sandy, as a coach, you have to back your captain and your veterans in moments like that.
Yeah.
And it paid off in spades today.
Absolutely. I mean, 18 points, 6 of 9 shooting, 4 of 6 from 3. I don't think many Opals fans expected that sort of offensive explosion from Tess Madgen in this contest. So for her, that was, a watershed moment in her career. I want to talk about Sammy Whitcomb as well. She was brilliant in the previous game against Canada. She was once again instrumental in running the offense and getting this team going. 12 points, 5 of 7 shooting, 5 rebounds, and 7 assists. I think she was wonderful. And the other thing that I would say is that the Opals prioritized off-ball movement in this one. We had bigs like Alana Smith, Ezzy Magbegor, cutting at the right time, also knowing when they had a lane and trusting themselves to move straight past their French opponent and get a really high probability shot at the rim. So there was a different level of offense that was deployed by the Opals in this one. It was more sophisticated, I thought, in parts. And it was also a really solid game plan where they knew that they had a few advantages there inside. And France had to adjust to that and play more bigs out on the floor because Australia's bigs were able to get past their opponents really easily in the first half, particularly.
Yeah, I think the first play of the game really set the tone, didn't it? I think it was a Magbegor wide open layup out of a half-court set with a bit of passing, a bit of off-ball movement, and it just kind of set the tone for what the Opals would be able to achieve when they look to make that extra pass, get the off-ball movement, whether it's a back screen or a cut, and just trust that, this is the process. And if we make these passes, make the extra pass and back our teammates going where we expect them to be, that we're going to be able to score out of it. So I think that really set the tone. Alana Smith, as you mentioned, was great tonight. And I think I'd like to see more of the offense going through her because she's so crafty and skilled around the post, especially, and the perimeter, but especially in the post. And I think she really showed what she's able to do when she kind of has the keys to the car a little bit more. She had a few fouls. Her rotation and was a bit disrupted a few times, but I thought she was incredible when it was going through her. Ezzy had her moments as well, really good, and I think we can definitely expect to see more of her. Just going back to your point on Wickham, I think she's been instrumental in the last 2 wins, and it's kind of funny. I feel like she does her best work when she's got the ball in her hands. Today, she had a couple of drives, late shot clock, where she was able to create through the key little kind of floaters and off-balance kind of running jumpers and that kind of thing. And, when she had the ball in her hands and she could create, it was just fantastic late clock. But I think I'd like to see more of her with a true point guard playing off the ball as a scorer, as opposed to, expecting to be the playmaker, but also the finisher at the end of the shot clock. They're asking a lot of her. And I think she's capable of doing it, but it would be interesting to see maybe a little bit more offense going towards her, but not necessarily through her. I thought it was really interesting in the last couple of games. We haven't seen much of Jade Melbourne in the fourth quarter. She's our starting point guard, but I'm not sure that Sandy necessarily has the trust in her to close out those games. Not entirely unexpected for a 21-year-old playing at her first Olympics. She's doing a tremendous job. It's not a knock on her, but I think it is interesting that Sandy's opting to kind of go for the more experienced lineups. It would be, I don't know, I'd perhaps just like to see a little bit more of Wickham being set up to score as opposed to facilitating the entire offense.
I'll touch point in time, and I do have to advise all of our watchers on YouTube and listeners, the Podium Pod is brought to you by Team Feet. Team Feet offers premium athletic socks for modern teams, however they compete, with sweat wicking cotton, arch support, ventilation panels, and compression stitching. Team Feet socks are built to perform. Whether your team is tiny or 1,000 strong, Team Feet unites and excites your players and supporters with their combination of quality and performance. Join basketball teams around Australia and the world by choosing Team Feet. For designs and worldwide delivery, head to teamfeet.com. It's an interesting point that you raise. Sandy elected to go with Jade and Izzy Borlace at one point there, and we didn't see the offense really flourish. I think the physicality of this tournament, and I want to call out Jade Melbourne specifically, pardon me, because it's every time she has the ball, she's attacked physically, and the referees are letting a lot of that go. I would want to make sure that's happening on both ends, because if it's the way that the game is being called, then it's up to Jade and it's up to the Opals to adjust to that. But I don't think there was the expectation of this amount of physicality. And I think Jade Melbourne is bearing the brunt of most of that physicality from opponents.
Yeah, it's funny when people say, the Olympics are at a different level, or playing WNBA is a different level. The shots don't necessarily get harder. They're the same shots you take in practice. There's a lot of the same passes. It is the physicality most of the time. And I think Jade's really bearing the brunt of that, especially as a point guard. And I think it wouldn't be surprising if the scouting reports were, attack the point guard, a 21-year-old who's at her first Olympics.
Yeah.
If you're coaching, you think that's, and especially a team like France who have got a lot of experienced EuroLeague players who play in those physical and really tough competitions, most of the year. So I think, I totally agree with you. I think Jade's probably getting a little bit of a rough run of it, but if that's the way the game's being officiated, this will be a good learning experience for her to kind of understand that and what to expect. I think she's doing a good job. I think she's cracking in, she's having a go. She's not kind of shying away. There have been turnovers, but I think that's been a problem for the Opals at large. I know a lot of people were criticising Steph Talbot earlier in the competition, but those turnovers aren't necessarily just bad ball handling and bad passing. Sometimes it's extra added physicality. It's a chop on the arm that isn't called. It's someone fighting through a screen and not able to get through, and it can be beyond just one person. So I like what Jade's doing. I'd like to see probably a little bit more protection, but I'm not sure we're going to see that in this tournament. And I think it's going to be on Jade and Sandy now to figure out what can we do to make life a little bit easier and open up. Is it higher screens up the floor? Is it more shared ball handling? I don't know the answer to that, but I would like to see. I'd like to see more of Jade, to be honest with you. I think she has so much talent. She's a dominant scorer at WNBL level. Obviously, this is a higher level. We haven't seen her kind of go off as such, but I think the tools are all there. I'd like to see a little bit more of her, certainly in the second half. Closing minutes of a game, you've got to go with the lineup that's working, and today Sandy did that and it paid off. But yeah, would like to see a little bit more of Jade Melbourne, I think.
I think it's incumbent on the coaching staff to have a word with the referees and to really go and start point guard as well. I mean, if this is the way that the game's going to be officiated, then it's up to the coaching staff to, have the right conversations at the right times, give that feedback throughout the game and say when the contact is not appropriate. I think you're right. I'd like to see more of Jade. I'd like to see her gain the offensive freedom that she's had in other competitions. And the only way that she can do that is by her teammates releasing her of the shackles of that physicality. And if the team are able to do that, then she'll get some space. And with some space, we know what a deadly scorer and facilitator she can be. So I think that has to be a focus if she's going to see significant court time for the rest of this tournament. I want to talk about the bigs off the bench. Mariana Tolo had, 6 really pretty strong minutes, I think, in the first half. And George played 25 minutes overall. She was a +6. She had that huge 3 in the corner to finish and a couple of that free throw at the end. Fortuitously missed the last free throw, which I think was an intended miss to try and stop France from having any chance of going up the floor. But, the big rotation we saw, what we saw in the previous games prior to this tournament, the couple of games that the Opals had, against Spain and Canada. We saw in this game why they've taken so many bigs, and that's their point of difference. They're able to get inside, they're able to score and be aggressive, and they had a really strong big rotation in this contest.
Yeah, I mean, Mariana Tola, I think, is a great situational player for the Opals. She's got the size, she's got talent, she can run the floor. We saw her get one of those open layups, pushing transition. I'm not surprised she's not playing big minutes, but I think she's a valuable piece for them. As we've just seen in her comment there, Ezzy and Alana outstanding in the third term. They've been electric, the pairing of Ezzy and Alana. I was surprised in some ways initially on selection that they didn't also go with the Darcy Garvin to interchange the kind of three tall but stretch bigs. But as you mentioned, Kayla was outstanding tonight. I think Sandy has an immense amount of trust in Kayla. The first game, perhaps, she looked like a little bit, perhaps, I don't know if it was the late Beck Allen withdrawal. I don't know if they were trying to figure out, put the pieces in the puzzle a little bit more. And there were some teething issues in that first game. But tonight, I think we saw what Kayla can bring when things are flowing and we've got the right kind of pieces on the floor. She can shoot. She can really good offensive playmaker, even when the ball's not in her hands. Back screens, doing all sorts all over the floor and coming up big in the clutch. We know that she's been a big time player for a long time. And tonight, as you mentioned, she kind of turned up when it mattered. But, complementing what Ezzy and Alana were able to do throughout the game. So I think that is a point of difference. And you know that if you're coming up into semifinals, quarterfinals, and taking on the USA, size becomes such a critical issue. And it's really encouraging, I think, to see those three bigs especially, as well as Tolo, having some big outings and playing some important minutes. Interestingly, no Lauren Jackson, who I think a lot of people expected to play big minutes, surprisingly. I'm not sure there was any initial idea that she was going to come in and play 30 minutes and be a 20-point scorer. In her early 40s, but no Jackson tonight, no Christy Wallace either. So interesting that you're two players down almost, and you're able to get it done against someone like France. So it seems like things are clicking at the right time, and as you mentioned, especially clicking with the bigs. So that's really encouraging for mine.
I feel with the fact the Opals will enter into a quarterfinal matchup, we still don't know who, we still don't know when. It's highly likely to be Wednesday night or Thursday morning our time. I think the slots for those games. So we cross our fingers and toes that it's not the 1 or 2 a.m. slot that the Olympics have this year. That would not be great. They looked after us for the Boomers. They've looked after us all tournament long, to be fair, the IOC. So well done to them and FIBA. But I want to look at what went wrong in this contest and what they need to avoid doing. And it's just turnovers. Will, there were 17 turnovers in this contest. We saw 24 turnovers against Nigeria. There were 7 turnovers in the last quarter alone. So they're actually tracking extremely well for turnovers up until 3/4 time. The team needs to take care of the ball. They do put too much air under the ball at times, and they do fail to help each other up the floor when there's pressure, which results in easier turnovers and strips by the opposition. What can Australia do differently to limit turnovers in the quarterfinal rounds?
Look, I think some of those turnovers you have to cop. You're always going to have turnovers. When someone drives and gets triple teamed and tries to whip a pass out, and there's movement on the perimeter, and the ball goes 1 inch wide for a shooter, it's frustrating, but at least the intent is there. The ones I can't live with are those backcourt turnovers or the lazy pass up the court from a guard. At some stages tonight, or this morning, I should say, we saw, Ezzy and Alana bringing the ball up the court, and they're completely capable of doing it. But I feel like the guards in the team, there needs to be a greater sense of ball security, safely getting the ball up the court. Whether that's getting bigs to come down and screen up the court and set some screens with intent and use them in the backcourt, whether it's tweaking the offense to get into motion earlier up the court. I just think there needs to be a bigger emphasis, especially those backcourt turnovers and entering in the offense. We saw Izzy Borlace make an early turnover tonight, and she didn't get back in the game. So Sandy clearly, he's sitting there thinking that ball security is paramount, and she's not going to, risk these young players going through the, those teething pains where they sometimes, there's nerves, there's all sorts of issues there. But I think ball security up the court from the guards just needs to be a greater issue. And it does beg the question, in some ways, should the Opals have taken a pure point guard? Obviously, there's Jay, there's Sammy, that Christy Wallace hasn't been playing the last 2 games. There's Magin as well. But, the question needs to be asked, how many of these are pure point guards? Would a Steph Reed have perhaps helped some of these issues, just playing some backup minutes and really like a point guard whose one wood is ball security and safely getting into an offense and using pick and rolls to facilitate? I'm not necessarily questioning the selection. Magin came out tonight and was electric off the bench. We've seen good minutes from most players so far. Atwell stepped in and had some big moments tonight, as well as the 13th selection. But it does pose the question, how important is having a point guard who, prioritises ball security and keeping those turnovers down? Well, very important in the scheme of things, I think.
And I think the other comment I'd make is touching on a point you made. It's a team scheme to beat this, to limit turnovers. It's everyone working together. Far too often, the point guard or the individual bringing the ball up the floor has been on an island, responsible for getting it across halfway without the help of teammates, either screening, making themselves available for a pass, whatever the case may be, and sprinting up the floor to try and help. So I think the team has to attack this as a team because of that personnel issue. I think, in the post-mortem and wash-up of this tournament, regardless of how it goes for the Opals, we will hear a lot of point guard names around like Steph Reed, Shyla Heal. But for this tournament and for the personnel they have in this tournament, they have to solve this as a team because they don't have that go-to ball handler, steady hand off the bench that's able to really, manage this team in that way. But we will await the quarterfinal drawings for the 2024 Paris Olympics. The Opals are through by the skin of their teeth. The Boomers, likewise, through by the skin of their teeth. And thus, we move to some quarterfinals where both teams, it's almost a mirror image situation where either team could win on their night if everything goes right for them. It's just that not has gone right so far for either team. Will, thank you so much for being on the Podium pod, and we look forward to talking to you later in the tournament.
Thanks, mate. Fingers crossed it's a lot later in the tournament.
Thanks to everyone for tuning in on YouTube. Make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, or sign up to the Podium pod on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as well as Unwrap, the Pick and Roll podcast as well. Head to pickroll.com.au and subscribe for great content like that of my broadcast partner today, Will Crouch. For Adam Webster, thank you so much for tuning in today on YouTube, and we'll see you again next time.